For Our Soil's Sake is brought to you by Holistic Management Canada. My hope is to feed our souls by having meaningful conversations with farmers, producers, and experts in agriculture to get a greater understanding of management practices that mitigate climate change, improve water quality, build soil health, and enhance habitat and biodiversity on agricultural landscapes. To give those of us who live in the city a better understanding of how what we consume directly affects our health and the health of the land. My name is Bronwyn Green, and I'll be your host. So for our soil's sake, let's dig right in. Thank you for tuning into the show. Joining us today, we have Moritz Passmann from Crescentwood Farm. Crescentwood is a family farm just north of Russel, Manitoba. The farm is about 1,200 acres of mixed cropland with perennial cover crops and livestock integration. This past summer, their farm was involved in Holistic Management Canada's Accelerator program. This program sets out to speed up the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices in Manitoba. So Moritz is here today to share his experience in the program and tell his farm story. Welcome, Moritz. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. In just a minute, I'll get you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but just for our listeners to know a little brief history on how we met. Moritz was actually the first farm that I ever monitored on my own in the program. So in an earlier episode, I talked about my experience, what led me to this point. And Moritz was actually there on my farm tour day where I brought people in and showed them a little bit of what it was like to do some observational monitoring on your pastures and your soil health. And then after the tour, he asked me if I'd come to his farm and look at a couple of his pastures and do some of the monitoring. So that was just something I did independently. So I was super excited to find out that he joined in on the program, the Accelerator program, which brought him into the network of EOV. And so we got him onto the program and we were able to monitor his farm for the first time this year and get all that information into the Savory Hub database and make a benchmark so that you can go from there. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit more about yourself for our listeners?
Sure. Where to begin? So my name is Moritz, I guess. Everyone knows that now. I was born and raised in Münchweil, that's in Germany. I started my career more like in the timber framing and construction business for quite a while. And then over the course of the last 6 years, I started to get really involved in agriculture, foremost in Manitoba, because my wife, we met in China and somehow we ended up in Canada in Russel. And that just got me really hooked on farming, like being involved in the first place and then also having that opportunity. Like it's not every day that you walk up to a family farm and no one is really taking over, right? So that's pretty unique from my point of view anyway. So that has been a very interesting thing because it's like, I don't know, migrating into another country and picking up a new trade. That's kind of the best out of both worlds, right? So it makes it very interesting most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, so the farm that you two came back to, that was your wife, Stacy, her parents own that farm?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then they just didn't have a successor necessarily, and you saw the opportunity to farm, or did you kind of already have a little bit of a desire to farm before that?
I always had a bit of a desire to farm. Like I always have been involved in the farming community, even in Germany. I'm from the little town I'm from. There's like mostly corn silage and vineyards and forestry around as agriculture. And most of my friends have been farming. So I always have been working out and being in contact with all that. Just, having the career as a timber framer and I had my own business and that was all going very well. Like I never felt the urgent need to do something different. Just being out here, having that opportunity, right? And I mean, there's always work around and I always like to work. So that, I don't know, we've made good partners from the beginning, kind of.
Nice.
And they've always been very supportive, like, especially my in-laws, like, no matter what, like if I wanted to do my timber framing business out there or get involved farming, like they have been more than helpful most of the time. Yeah, all the time, not most of the time.
Awesome. And so, what changed in the farming practices from when you started working with them? So, I think it's Shirley and Ross. Those are her parents.
That's
They were
correct.
they were both managing the farm, and then you came in and started managing it with them. Did things change significantly when that happened, or did you kind of follow along with what they were doing at first to kind of get your bearings?
Well, it's it's kind of interesting. It sounds always like a conventional farm uh, that creates sometimes these horror pictures in people's head, and it wasn't really a conventional farm up to that degree. Where we did a lot of tillage passes or a big amount of chemical input, mostly based to the fact I believe that Ross has been farming alone. Like now we're doing 1,300 acres. It's not just something you do by walking by there.
Right,
And I think just lots of the stuff that could have been done, like on most conventional farms, just never got done.
right,
And yeah, I think that has been beneficial, our beneficial turnout here right now to take that over. We don't, we're not dealing with, really degraded soils.
right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not that bad yet. And they always used to have cattle. They run them holistically in the end. Like they both did the holistic management course. Well, I would have to lie now, but sometime after the 80s, maybe.
Okay.
So quite a
So
while
they took
ago.
that course well before you started farming with them.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was the interesting thing because holistic management has always been, like that hovering term on the farm, But by the time I got involved, the herd had been sold already. I helped loading the last bull, and that was my first day on the farm, I believe.
Oh,
That was kind
cool.
of the transition that we had there. So very, very small livestock involvement for me there. But they manage a pasture that way, right? And I mean, Ross, he has been doing somewhat with tillage, radishes, and broadcasting Timothy and diverse blends in pastures. Um, he was doing that for a long time already. It's just then there was no one really there that had interest to take over the farm before I came, and then grain farming was kind of the early retirement solutions, and that mostly with wheat and canola, due to the I'm not going to say that it's easy because it is not a bit convenient, I would say, alternating a cereal and an oilseed
Right.
uh, is somewhat of it's not a crop rotation really, it's an alternation though. But yeah, that's where we came from anyways. So obviously,
Okay.
yeah, my first year I did kind of you know, just starting, you're not having a lot of input there on what we're doing. And, we've been putting on anhydrous with 4-inch spikes on our implement. And we had an air seeder with 10-inch sweeps on it, which sounds crazy by now. But,
Hmm.
and then we really took baby steps from the beginning. Like the first idea that we had was to increase our organic matter in our fields. That was like one of the very first things I think we did 4 years ago, and we
Okay.
basically just did that by agreeing that we won't bale crop residue or straw anymore. So everything
Nice.
that grows on the field stays out there. Versus, before we would have had baled it, especially when they had livestock. Um, so that was the first big thing. And by doing that, we kind of, I mean, I was still learning. So it obviously was not, it almost was easier for me to get into regenerative farming versus conventional farming a little bit, I believe, due to the fact that regenerative ag, it seems like most things make sense. I can understand and grab where they come from and why things are the way they are. Versus like conventional farming, a lot of it, especially with inputs and all of that, it just feels like it gets super complicated after 2 minutes, and no one really knows why.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's
Everyone's
kind
just
of
been
it.
kind of doing it for so long and just piling it on top of it. It doesn't, there's not really reasoning behind why it's happening. It's hard to understand.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, always, it makes it sound like there will be some kind of test tube crops out there, right? Like your wheat need X amount of nitrogen fertilizer and X amount of phosphorus fertilizer each year, and that will give you a good crop, right?
Mhm.
It's like almost two easy answers to quite complex questions and issues that we're running into as farmers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Heavily relying on the technology aspect and not necessarily the creativity part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the technology aspect is almost the same, or you can use the same kind of technology for regenerative farming, right? Like some things just make sense and are good developments, right? Don't get me wrong. Like there are good things to do even with chemical and dry fertilizer. Just the the amount that we're doing it with or by, it's just a bit out of hand, right?
Right. It's just destroying the organic matter too, almost.
True. Well, all the soil, all the soil life, all the soil biology, almost, right?
Mhm.
But plus raising maybe not as healthy plants as you possibly could,
Right.
right?
Do you want to explain the difference because your farm is a little bit unique compared to the other farms in terms of you aren't like a livestock operation, and so we you're the only farm in the program that is cropland, and so it was a little bit different for us to monitor it, and people right now are having a hard time understanding how cropland can be regenerative, and
Nice.
so how are you doing that with cash crops? Like, what are the practices that you're doing that like kind of fall under the bracket of regenerative farming without having livestock? And like, I think you guys do integrate livestock, so that you just don't own them. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we still have pasture that is fenced from when we had cattle.
Hmm.
Um, we don't have any. We rent that all out. Um, yeah, I still have my timber framing business, so I really don't want cattle, really, because I feel like it keeps me over the winter, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I'm the only weird guy in the program that has only crops. So that's always.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm getting used to that by being the weird guy.
Yeah,
Um,
just like the weird guy in the already weird group of
right?
alternative farming.
Yeah, yeah. Story of my life. Oh well.
And so sorry.
So
So what are some of the things that you do that don't involve animals that are helping the soil in terms of like how you plant your crops or what kind of crops you're planting or
right. So just in general, I need to say that like we're still experimenting and learning here, right? I don't want to give the
Mhm.
impression that we would have it figured out.
Yeah.
But the thing what we are doing, so I said already that we increased the organic matter by not baling or taking any organic matter off our fields anymore. Then at the same time we reduced tillage. Like we never really had any high speed disc passes on the farm, anyways. But just by changing our seeding implement from 10-inch sweeps to, I believe they're 1 3/8 openers now, and the anhydrous, for example, we went from 4-inch to 3/4 inch. Like you reduce your tillage drastically just by changing shovels.
Right.
You know, like that was a very easy, very first thing we did, and then very early we started to treat our seeds with liquid seed dressing, basically microbes or compost extracts, if you want. That's the right term for it. So we tried early to introduce microbes to our soil and reduce the amount of fertilizer that we put in. And this year we've been able to reduce our fertilizer inputs by 20%, and we
Wow.
hope to do the same next year. But that only works in correlation with like a diverse cover crop land that we have out in the field, and those microbes that we're reintroducing. That would be in a healthy ecosystem situation, they would be there anyways, right?
Mhm.
We kind of are in the process of diversifying our crop rotation. Now we have 9 cash crops that we're dealing with versus 2,
Mhm.
which sounds awesome for regenerative farming. It just makes things quite a bit more difficult on the farm. And then the other thing is, um, oh, now I forgot what I wanted to say. Sorry, what was that?
It's all good. We were talking about the different practices you're doing, and so you were talking about adding the microbes to the
Right.
soil
Yeah, the different
and having the
practices.
diverse crops so that you can feed the microbes that are actually already there,
Right.
perhaps? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the idea is feeding the microbes, maybe not really, because they are supposed to find their food down there, and having that correlation from living root that extracts exudates, feeding the microbes, which then are freeing up like important nutrients, right? Which are
Right.
in the soil, they are just not water soluble. which are the what every or most soil test is about, right? So that's always another interesting thing, like testing for different kind of sources of nutrients which are available is like kind of total different perspective, right?
Yeah.
If you only change for water soluble nutrients, you will only the only result will be that you put them back in because they're always getting more and more deficient, right, every year.
Hmm.
But maybe those are not the nutrients that we're after.
Right.
So
And
we want to,
so when do you guys plant that cover crop so that it keeps, like, what's the difference between the cover crop and the cash crop growing season so that you're like having that ground covered more throughout the
well,
year? When do you plant that cover crop and how does that work?
right, we try to do it at the same time. So like, let's say our seeding finally starts. So the first pass in the field last year we did with a Velma, which is a broadcast applicator.
Okay.
And with that one, we mixed that's what we put the cover crop seed on. So we broadcasted our cover crop seed on, mixed with worm castings as a bit of as a fertility program there. And
Nice.
then we came in with our seeding equipment and sowed the cash crop into it. So means we have two seeding passes, and then just by seeding our actual cash crop, our cover crop gets incorporated,
Right.
which is kind of a nice thing. Like whenever you have let's say a black shank or you have a little mess with an air seeder, like I know no one misses with an air seeder, but I do sometimes, where you don't have just weeds approach there, right? It's mostly your cover crop that comes, which
Oh,
I think is
awesome.
a nice thing. And then since they've been seeded at the same time, so that cover crop blend that we're after just tries to have a balanced diversity of warm season broadleaves, warm season grasses, cold season legumes, that kind of stuff, to have like the most diverse root structure that we're introducing to the field beside our cash crop. So that is the idea, right? Like a normal ecosystem would have had like almost a balanced amount of each variety of plant, and we try to copy that a little bit. That's what we're after. So that seeding rate and the exact contents of it is still, it's probably get tweaked every year, but we have that more or less balanced now, we think, or we have something that we like. Let's put it that way. And it contains a bit of low, middle, and high growth to get at all three stages of the cash crop to make sure something is growing with it in the same canopy. And then at the same time, after harvest, once we take everything off, that we have something growing close to the ground right after, to make use of that sunlight that we're having and get that carbon sequestration really going, like throughout the year as long as possible.
Right.
So there are,
Fantastic.
there, are- there are several things that we try to do with that cash crop, right? I mean, there's always erosion control and all of that, but we have it more really or we like to figure it out to have it more as our fertility program. Like
Hmm.
all these microbes that we're introducing, they should be abundant in a healthy system. So the more we try to, or we think the more we try to copy a healthy ecosystem in the area where we are with the plants that are available to us, we feel like we get the best result or the healthiest plants, right?
Right. Having all those functional plant groups working together, you're going to get the best expression from them because they have the other ones there too.
Exactly. Another thing I thought was very interesting with that broadcasted cover crop is like you have different things emerging in different areas, right?
Hmm.
So now with all the smart literature that we have available, like it's kind of a chase to figure out like why certain varieties do better in certain areas. Not necessarily only because they've been drowned out or what, just
Hmm.
really because of the nutrients that are available
Right.
or the pH levels or whatever, right? Like we
Right.
try to get that a bit as an indicator for what is happening in areas.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, it looks pretty cool too. You know,
Yeah.
we we had you see those red clovers coming through. Buckwheat usually takes off and just looks nice. The sunflower sticking through the wheat. Yeah, might be a
Yeah.
little
It looks
disturbing
great.
to neighbors, but I thought it looked pretty good.
I thought that one field, what was it, wheat or barley that had the flax in it? All the little,
Barley and flax, yeah,
yeah, yeah. I thought that field was so pretty. Looks pretty
yeah,
and has lots of functions.
it has, yeah. And that was the barley and flax. That was actually an intercrop. So we
Okay.
wanted the flax to be there to be part of our cash crop. In the rest of the fields, flax is just part of the normal cover crop blend that we bring out there. just
Right.
due to its mycorrhizal fungi, um, yeah, dependency, I guess, on
Right.
encourage to build that up.
Cool.
Yeah. So each plant we pick has kind of a role or job that it's supposed to do,
Hmm.
right? Very often it gets like focused on nitrogen fixation, but I think just having more that the correlation of different root structures and depth in different plants, I think that is what really, the more diversity that there's out there, I feel like the more we kind of, I don't know, the better we're set up for whatever throws the growing season at us, maybe, put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, one might do better during whatever climate situation is happening that growing season, and then the other one will flourish because it's a different environment.
Exactly, right? Different pest pressure, a late frost or whatever.
Yeah.
We just hope with the amount of different things we put out there that some will some will do it. Some will survive.
Yeah. And so you talked about the chat like earlier you said, and was going to be one of my questions. You said that all these things that we're doing is great for like the regenerative side of farming. Um, because you see how it affects the ecology of the land and it improves. How does this translate into benefiting you? And like it sounds bad in terms of like profitability. Of course, you want to see the land improve because it will indirectly improve you. But also, like, how are you qualifying doing this based on like, are you becoming more profitable because of it? Like, is it worth doing all these extra things that are challenging and not necessarily convenient like conventional grain farming could be? Why do you do the extra things that are challenging? Like, how is that paying off for you?
Right. Just one thing I want to clarify: conventional grain farming is never convenient.
Yes, yeah. It's not the right thing to say. People are like,
Right?
farming is never convenient.
Like there's no such easy thing. It's just
True.
yeah. um, yeah. Why does it make it worse? Our net dollar per acre is more profitable,
Hmm.
but we lost some of the yield
Hmm.
a little bit. But I mean, yeah, profitability per acre I think is the ultimate unit. But also at the same time, like we're just starting that transformation of our ground, kind of right.
Right.
Like all of those things, I'm convinced will be a lot better, like profitability. And once that all gets going, I think it will be easier to manage too. It's just where we come from, we had wheat and canola,
Right.
so things are relatively easy in terms of bin space, handling, cleaning things out and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, Now we're dealing with 9 cash crops, which
Hmm.
has also its benefits, right? Like our harvest starts way earlier and we're done earlier too, based on the fact that we have different crops to harvest and wait for them, and not just start wheat and then be like 4 weeks long too late for wheat, and then start canola and be too late for canola the rest of the season.
Right.
It stretches it out a bit more, which I find very beneficial. Like it takes a lot of the pressure of taking 1,300 acres off with 2 people, in those 2-3 months, or like over the course of 4.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when you guys took off when you said you used 20% less fertilizer, did you notice a significant decrease in your yield this year or not significant enough?
Stable. So basically increase.
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. That is awesome. And
Yeah.
like once you really saw that happening, which was a nice thing, with I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like, Russ, he's farming his entire life. He grew up with that family farm tradition, right? And
Hmm.
then I'm coming around, did something totally different my whole life, and just got very passionate about it and educated myself. And now then we changed big things, big time out actually in the field, right?
Hmm.
I don't think that has been very normal for most people in my position. Like I think
Right.
lots of people, it's more of a struggle to get things changed in that regard.
Right. And you're fortunate enough to have two in-laws that are like very flexible with change.
Yeah, and I mean with that holistic management, they already have the mindset, right?
Right.
We don't have to I don't know, argue over things, why things would make sense or why we should stop doing things. It's clear. It's just implementing that. And then, I don't know, 2 years before retirement, changing structural things of your whole farming career is kind of a odd thing to do, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so did they kind of coach you through what holistic management was and then you went and took the course, or do you it was kind of like they some of these practices were already being integrated, so you just learned as you learned how they were farming?
No, I think it has been around, and they have an environmental farm plan and their holistic goals, and we have been talking about that and reviewed those things, but they haven't been really like present in day-to-day decisions or day-to-day work on the farm. And then I think after me taking the course and understanding all of that a lot better, um,
Nice.
we both have that education now, so we kind of talk about the same thing, which makes it very interesting. Yeah, like the
Right.
questioning, the testing questions we probably use the most when we have decision-making things to do.
Right,
Decision-making
going
things,
over those like
things to
questions to
decide.
make decisions. You guys use those often?
Not often, I wouldn't say, but like big purchases or like fundamental decisions. Yes, we review
Right.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what benefit, like when you saw me doing the monitoring on the farm during that tour and then you wanted me to come do it on your farm, why? Like I kind of already have an idea because we talked about it, but just for our listeners, like what was going through your head, what the importance would be of me coming and like monitoring your soil?
Well, at that point, I also just didn't know much about it. Right. It
Right.
was pretty obvious that you knew. Um, so yeah, basically learn and get an idea what's happening on our farm.
Right.
Yeah, that I don't know. We're always adding stuff, and at that stage, I believe we haven't been looking that much with a shovel, I guess, in the fields when we made decision.
Right.
Yeah, so that was
And so
very helpful. And then the EOV in general, just having things that get kept track of or are monitored, right? Like I believe
right.
it being very helpful just to have it written down and have it monitored and be able to trace things back or see changes more. Yeah, you see them better when you have the data, right? Otherwise, you're
Obviously,
just
yeah.
driving by it for decades, and well, how are you going to remember what it looked like 10 years ago?
Yeah, and it feels a lot different when you're actually in the field. I've heard that from a lot of farmers that once they actually go there and they're looking down at that level, you can see things that are improving that you don't necessarily see just driving by the field every day.
Yeah, yeah, there's that direct uh, relation from your foot tracks in the field and your deeper understanding of what is happening below the soil, yeah, below the
Right.
ground.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, every time yeah, it's like most things that you learn, right? You do them and you get better, and all of a sudden you understand things.
hmm What would you say your biggest challenge is farming? And it could be like a specific challenge that you're like, oh, this one thing we came up in the past year and we're having a hard time dealing with it, or just in general, what you think the biggest challenge is for you to farm.
Um, Biggest challenges to farm. Yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like being on the farm and in charge and surrounded by work and projects is the most positive and the most negative thing, depending on my day. Um,
It depends on your mood.
yeah, that's just no, it's just totally different to what I did before I came to Canada, right?
Right.
I was self-employed. You have your workshop, you have your business, you have your building sites, but you're not living on the building site, which is totally opposite from farm life. You're there 24 hour, and days don't really matter anymore. Daytimes don't matter either. Kind of during the season, you just keep on going, and I
Right.
enjoyed it. I think that's pretty awesome. Just every now and then when you get tired, just like, oh man, I need to do this and that, and wherever you look, there's just stuff to do.
Yeah, and there's no one else to pass the buck to. You're the only one.
Not yet.
Yeah.
No, no. But that's yeah. That no, I don't think that's a negative thing. It just that's something that I realize every now and then.
Yeah.
That factor being so much surrounded by it. Yeah, I don't know if that's something, but
Yeah.
it's not bad.
Yeah. It just like consumes you, but you're like not and that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just all consuming.
Yeah, absolutely not negative. It's just yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a lot. I think.
And
Yeah,
so you mentioned your timber framing carpentry job. You still have that off-farm job to supplement income?
that's right. Yeah,
Okay. And how does that
basically
work?
during the off
You
season.
off season? Yeah. Nice. Does that translate into your farming at all? Like, does that experience in that field help you?
Yes, a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, which is weird because you wouldn't think there's much that overlaps there, but there's actually quite a bit. And
Nice.
I did a. I'm also a civil engineer technician, so you know
Okay.
a lot of the machinery things or loads and all that kind of stuff, rates, whatever. Like that has been easy going, so that hasn't been a big hurdle. And then
Right.
with the timber framing thing, yeah, I see a lot of parallels there. Like where I picked it up in Germany. So first of all, the product that you have is 100% natural, right? Like that itself is kind of a good thing. And then where we sourced our timbers from, it was regeneratively forested timber.
Oh,
So
really?
that's kind of what I grew up with,
Okay.
which is kind of
And
odd. But the forests around our area have been farming regenerative. That was kind of a pilot project, I believe, back in the days when they started that.
and sorry, that was in Germany?
Yeah, in the Black
Okay.
Forest.
Okay.
And so they also had areas where they stopped doing anything, like certain areas that they put in a conservation easement and totally left alone out of for research projects, I believe.
Okay.
So that kind of stuff and that idea, and then obviously with regeneratively sourced timber, so that whole healthy building, healthy shelter idea, massive wood panels and these natural materials like straw, clay, wood, brick, um, and sticking to them, which we have been
Mhm.
kind of forced to because I worked most of the time, yeah, the majority of the time in timber framing in listed building restoration. So you have these very old, like half timber framed houses. I think they translate half timbered houses that we have in Germany. So the second you start to renovate or fix them up, you're tied to doing it under certain code with the materials that they would have had available at the time
Oh,
and
okay.
joinery and all that kind of stuff, right?
Interesting.
And that is like a super interesting thing because at the same time, in that profession, kind of you build these like super efficient new houses, with vapor barriers and heat conversion and whatnot, or part of our trade anyways. And we were focused on fixing up these very old structures, like houses from the 16th century and stuff like that.
Wow.
And they tell you very quickly what works over time and what does not. Like if you have a
Yeah.
structure that old and you have to repair them for some reason, most of the time it's not the original part of the structure that caused the issue. Like most of the time it was improvements that we felt like were necessary at one point, added insulation, vapor barriers, all that kind of stuff. And that's really when things start to rot. And even more importantly, when we step away from having healthy structures for people, which we're
Mhm.
supposed to build actually,
Mhm.
right? So,
Yeah.
and that directly translates to me, anyways, in regenerative agriculture, where we try to raise more nutrient dense, more healthy products for human
Mhm.
consumption. So,
That's so
half of my
cool.
life I focused on preparing healthy shelter for humans, and now I focus equally on producing nutrient dense food
That's so cool.
by by the same things, right? By mimicking
Yeah.
somewhat nature and nature products or ways nature does things, right?
Yeah.
Like most houses are designed in a way because that is the best shape to withstand the forces of weather in that area, right? That's why we
Mhm.
have distinct structures in certain areas.
Right.
And that is the same out in the field, more or less,
Right.
creating a kind of
Right. The different
environment copy.
stratas of
Yeah,
grassland and
absolutely.
forest and
Exactly. Yeah. That
yeah.
diversity, right?
Right.
That makes it then unique and way more prone to whatever nature throws at it.
Yeah. Very cool. And
Yeah, so
so
it's weird because lots of people don't get that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I guess I'm not a real carpenter either. Carpenter in the carpenter sense. But like that's why that all makes sense to me. It kind of feels like it all channels towards this one thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's
And
nice.
so and last time I talked to you, or not last time I talked to you, but I feel like maybe even a year ago you were building a like a beautiful home for you and your family. Is that still how's that project going?
I'm still working on the beautiful home.
Along with everything else you do.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have that we have that big barn on the farm. It's
Mhm.
45 feet by 80, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know. I took that on pretty much the same second we got to the farm. Like it was either tear it down or fix it up right now. And
Yeah.
so we started fixing up, obviously. So this year we focused on siding. We got this sided new, and yeah, I hope at one point we get the house done in there. But it's not going to be next year.
It's a long project if you want to build it right, I guess.
It is, and I mean I do it in my free time. Haha. So
A laugh of when that free time happens.
yeah, I think I have to add that being surrounded by work and projects is also probably like 89% my fault
Yeah.
with all the projects I'm taking on and starting and doing all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All those projects can either be exciting and give you motivation or feel like overwhelming.
yeah, I need to get both out of them. I feel like
Yeah. Okay, so how come you applied for the Regenerative Accelerator program?
I need help.
Good answer.
To be honest, yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I figured would happen. Like I was, yeah, I don't know.
No,
You
that's a
just
great
need to do
answer.
that regenerative thing, and I was sure that's a good way to learn. You know, or get in contact with people with like whatever. Like, I mean, that's like a incredible opportunity. You kind of have to jump on that.
Right. Did you get
Yeah.
help? What was your favorite thing about the program?
Yeah, I got mentored by Blaine Jurdes from Saskatchewan, and just having him out on the farm and getting his input, and at the same time getting introduced to that, that regen ag holistic management crowd in the area
Right.
is kind of very valuable, I believe. I'm
Right.
not much of a, to be honest, I'm not much of a Zoom guy or computer, I guess, in general. But I would
Mhm.
drive 3 4 hours to talk to someone for half an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
get that. It's awesome that Blaine got to come out to your farm. I feel like that's a whole nother experience when you're actually out on the land and talking about it with somebody who has the same like knowledge or experience doing something similar to what you're doing.
Oh boy, not the same, just way more, like way above my head. But yeah, like having him out there, and seeing what he's looking for, and all these little things.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one step at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your project that you implemented with the grant?
Um, we had two different fields. So last year we did the barley and flax for the first time, and part of the grant got implemented for the cover crop land with the barley and flax
Okay.
because there was a bit of a different cover crop land than the rest. And then we added Italian ryegrass as a cover crop to a normal wheat crop. And then in that
Hmm.
field, we had an issue with foxtail barley from the previous year. And we basically had to spray out 30 acres.
Hmm.
And there we planted a highly diverse cover crop into as a rejuvenate, regeneration program, I guess. Rejuvenate or rejuvenation?
Rejuvenation program?
Rejuvenation program.
Yeah.
It just sounds odd. Yeah. Anyways, that's what we did with that. Yeah. And that was a tremendous result. Like, really, just from, we're not scientists, but we walk in the field and we dig a hole and we smell and look. And we didn't do very many infiltration tests this year due
Hmm.
to the weather. It didn't seem to make much sense.
Right.
But yeah, it was wild. Like, you could tell, this has been a field that had wheat and canola alternation probably for the last 12 or 13 years.
Hmm.
So, you start to see these saline areas and foxtail pressure, and, just things start to get out of balance at one point.
Yeah.
And it was like, it felt like 3 or 4 weeks after we seeded that into, it was just like exploding with life. Lots of birds, and we saw a lot of deer in there too, which we usually don't see, like right in that spot of the field. Like you see deer all over the time, but
Yeah.
all the time. That was something that we could tell right away. And then just from driving and walking in there was just so softer than the rest of the field. Like there was a clear line right within the field, which we kind of used as a reference, like going back
Yeah.
and forth. That was something that struck out right away. Yeah.
Nice.
Unfortunately, though, we had to. Well, I cut it for hay, and it had sorghum Sudan grass in it, and unfortunately, we got a frost on it. So there's a high nitrate concern in sorghum Sudan grass after frost.
Okay.
So that was the reason then we couldn't get anyone on there to graze it. And then I also didn't want to bale it and sell the bales anymore. So what
Hmm.
we ended up doing was I cut it with the hay vine, we let it dry, and then we just picked it up with an old combine and chopped it up. That was it.
Okay. And you just left the litter there?
That's right. Basically, as armor on the soil for the winter, right?
Nice.
So we purposely didn't try to incorporate it or whatever, just have it sitting there as a mat, and then we have to see come next spring how it looks like. Yeah.
Right. And so the sorghum, is that something that you're going to try and experiment with again next year? Or
I don't
is the
think so.
fear of frost kind
No,
of, you don't want to go through that again?
no. If I would be a cattle guy, probably for the biomass production and all of that.
Right.
But like part of the so let's say for that relay or intercropping or whatever you want to call it, like different varieties out in the field at the same time.
Hmm.
Like herbicide applications are always tricky, right? Because you're likely going to spray out some of your culture, so you almost can't do any in-crop herbicide passes,
Hmm.
which is not the end of the world. It just needs to be managed and thought of. And then the other thing is going to be harvestability, right? I can't have like endless sorghum Sudan grass peeking through my wheat crop and all goes through the combine.
Yeah.
So there are just certain things that, like sorghum Sudan grass, makes sense for the biomass and the roots, but at its certain point, it doesn't make any sense to a crop production.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So it
Cool.
doesn't work with everything. We had sunflowers though, which stuck up, and they didn't seem to be an issue at all going through the machine. So
Oh,
there's
nice.
always that learning effect. Like, yeah, I was happy nothing was a real issue this year, but I'm sure we're gonna end up with a little catastrophe at one point.
Something's always coming.
Yeah, we had hairy and veg this year, and the hairy veg really took over in certain areas, which is a
Mhm.
nice thing to see. Just swathing it and then harvesting it is more of a little adventure, right?
Right, because you've never done that before.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So you kind of learn on the go.
Do you guys have
But
your own seed cleaner?
no, unfortunately not. I bought a dockage separator, which
Okay.
is the intention was to separate our intercrops, let's say peas from oats, flax from barley. I thought I might be able to do hairy veg from fall rye, but I'm not.
Okay.
That needs to be done somewhere else. But yeah, basically to separate big grains from small grains, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it really just goes by size and whatever dockage is in your sample.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
and that
Do
works
you
pretty good.
find do you find it hard to find a seed cleaner and getting it and stuff? I know some of the other farmers I talked about the idea of that machinery and it being hard to come across. Do you have a hard time getting your grain there and
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I mean especially starting out. Like there are good setups that work very well and that also have the bushel capacity to make it worthwhile. Um, but those things are usually or very often they're self-made and kind of built together,
Mhm.
different machines, which is good if you know what you're doing. At this stage where we are at, we looked the first time this year at a big amount of peas and oats that we had to separate. So we're not there to put a lot of money in a permanent setup. Um, yeah, we're still learning that what we need and what we feel like we need or what would work well or what not. So
Right.
that would why that dockage separator makes a lot of sense. Like it's mobile, you can go wherever,
Yep.
and you're not tying up too much money
Totally.
for the amount of options that you're adding to the operation.
Right. And so that leads me to my next question. If you had an endless amount of money, time, and resources, what would you change about your farm? My little pipe dream question that I ask everybody.
The pipe dream question. Yeah. I'm pretty sure in the questionnaire I said I move into the barn and add a helicopter to the machinery fleet.
Yeah, I want to know more about this helicopter. What?
Yeah. Kind of weird. That was the first thing I thought of, having
Yeah,
unlimited amount of money. But yeah, I just
it's
very
so
often think that would be the
specific.
most productive thing for what we're doing and where we're doing it. Yeah.
How so? Like, so you can monitor the crops without having to drive through them?
Well, you could monitor. You can spray with helicopters too. That's what they
Right.
do in Australia a lot. And
Okay.
just like, yeah, I don't know, running back and forth from the field very often would be a lot faster the way the crow flies than following the gravel road all the time.
Totally. I just love
Yeah.
that answer. So many people were so modest and couldn't say something, and then you're like a helicopter. I was like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is about that?
Don't hold me
Well,
accountable to that, or if I really want to do that one day. But I don't know.
yeah,
Sometimes I feel like
totally.
that makes a
If
lot
you
of
get the
sense.
money, I'm gonna be calling you immediately and being like, Moritz, where's your helicopter? I want to ride.
Yeah. You can do your EOVs from up top.
Oh my goodness, those aerial footage, that would be such good thing to see year to year and just the difference in each pasture because like in one pasture you can have one section that's totally different. And so to see the difference in the landscape, that would be awesome.
Right. Yeah, it is. I got to fly over our lands, I think 3 years ago, and it's
Mhm.
amazing how different it looks. It's really weird.
Yeah. I think even what I was talking to one of the farmers last year was actually Doug Turnbull. We were talking about like the drones and investing
Yeah.
in a drone to do the spraying of your fields because I don't know, I guess the big ones probably like $2,000 to $5,000, but then they can only carry so much and depending how big your operation is. But I think some people are looking into the drone spraying.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be interesting though, because you have to carry a lot of product, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
maybe
the
with
emissions
hose.
and fuel and stuff to go back and forth, and battery power too. I think that was one of the issues.
I know some machinery companies, they come up with like fleet options for
Mm.
autonomous crop production. So
Oh, okay.
basically, not huge tractors like we have now without an operator, more like wheelbarrow-sized machines, and then I don't know, 50 of them per field.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's interesting,
That is different.
but I'm not
Cool.
sure. Going to see that out of my helicopter then.
Okay. What would you say to someone who has no experience in farming but would like to start?
Just go ahead, call a farmer and ask for a job.
Yeah,
Best
it's
you can
that
do.
easy.
It is. It literally is. Like, don't waste any time researching farms or farms that you would like or that do what you think is right. Just get on a farm and start working.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah.
answer.
And then the rest is going to come. Like, if that's not the kind of farm you like, you can change anyways.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's
It's
also
just,
like a lot more farm job opportunities than people realize. Like 2 years ago when I was looking into it, I was kind of like, well, which farm would want me? And I have no experience and yada yada. And then you start getting into the farm world and you realize there's lots of opportunities to just work on a farm
there
and get
is. Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, really, just go for it. Yeah, I think
um,
that's the best. It's like, there's not, yeah, there's more stuff that is more or less the same, I feel like, regenerative or conventional farming,
right.
like on farm every day, that there are actually things that are different.
Hmm.
So I don't think it matters if you go to like regenerative farm or not right away. Just to learn the basics, you can do that wherever.
Absolutely. Right. The concept and decision making that comes with managing a regenerative farm is like there's still aspects of just like everyday farming that's just farming. There's no difference. And just learning that.
Exactly, and that will never change,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Good advice. And so just coming to the end here, is there any other projects that you're working on or anything exciting that you want to share?
Yeah. we're gonna start seeding some perennial water runways in our fields next year.
Okay.
That is interesting because it's kind of the total opposite of what people around us sometimes do, kind of
Yeah.
draining water holes and all of that. And
Hmm.
we believe we would see big benefits of having them better left alone and in a functioning root system than trying to seed through there every year and fighting through there all the time. And yeah.
Right. And so, just to give some background for those who don't know, usually when you're croplanding, the ideal land would be like get rid of all the bush, get rid of all the watering holes, just so it's like a flat, even place that they can seed and harvest with their machinery. That's
Right.
correct,
It's
right?
just that's right. With the size of machinery that we reached by now, it's just like almost not really efficient enough to circle around objects and not have a straight line as often as you can, right?
Yeah.
Like your productivity just goes below. So that's why a lot of people need that, yeah. And there are
But
areas where you
you,
can do that, and there are areas where you shouldn't, maybe.
right. And so, what you guys are doing is trying to bring back those water or just let them be there naturally.
That's right. We figured we degraded them for long enough now, and now we let them heal.
Nice. That's awesome.
So that is
Cool.
one project that we're going to do. Um, we're going to go a bit more into application of micronutrients, maybe with foliar applications. That would be something I would really like to melt some urea to have some liquid nitrogen applications.
Okay.
Play around with that a little bit. Um, we're not adding more crops next year because I'm a bit freaked out of the amount that we're having to deal with already.
Right.
So we're just trying to get better at them, learning from some mistakes from last year. Yeah,
Nice.
I think that's it with new projects. That's a good
Nice.
thing. We have enough to get better at. We don't need
Yeah, to
necessarily
work
new
on.
stuff.
Awesome. Sweet.
Yeah,
Okay. I just want to wrap the session up with sharing some resources to our listeners where they can hear more about you or follow along your journey. Or you guys don't direct market your grain, correct? It's just, it all goes into like the commodity market.
that is right. Yeah, so far. But
Right.
that's also the first year where we have commodities that can be marketed into different streams, I guess. We have some
Nice.
mold barley, fortunately. We got some fall rye. Yeah, I would like to get that somehow into the distilling and brewing market. That would be just awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. And we also
Contact.
have pasture raised pork
Okay.
that we try to sell.
Nice. How do
That's
people
another.
contact you to buy that pork?
They would have to call me.
Okay.
Yeah, we're pretty
Nice.
middle aged. We don't have a Facebook page or Instagram account or anything like that.
Yeah,
But I
that's
most of the time I answer my phone,
nice.
613-276-3940.
You guys got that? Call Moritz.
Well, we got
Yeah,
like a
and so
million scam calls tomorrow.
yeah. um yeah, we'll post your information like with this podcast. We'll post it on our website and our social media and maybe just provide them with an email link if anybody wants to get a hold of you or contact you or has more questions about your farm or
Sure,
yeah.
all the time.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
please reach out. Right on.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
To learn more about holistic management, regenerative farming principles, and the farms in Manitoba that are implementing these practices, check out our Instagram and Facebook page or visit our website at holisticmanagement.ca and make sure to sign up to our newsletter so we can let you know about all the upcoming events and learning opportunities in your area. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future on this podcast, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. For our soil's sake, thanks for listening in, everyone.